Bam, what is that right there? That's a PS4 controller. So I brought this today because you can actually control teenagers with this. You just link it in and then watch this. Jump, jump, jump. Oh, one of them moved a little bit. No, not really. So when I was a kid, I got something a little bit like this. It wasn't like this one because this is a PS4, right? I think that's the newest thing still that's out, although there's a new one coming, right? Or is it already out? So I got one of these. Some of you know what the one I got looked like. It was a Nintendo, the original Nintendo NES controller. Just 2 buttons on that thing and one little, up, down, left, right, and select start. And you could do all your cool codes on that. So I got that for my birthday one year. It was an amazing gift at that time. No one in my neighborhood had a Nintendo. I was the first. So when we drove back from the store into my neighborhood, I held it up out the window. And literally all the children from my neighborhood streamed behind the car and ran to my house. We immediately went and plugged it in and had this amazing party. So I was given this incredible gift. I've got all these people ready to share that gift with me. And how do you think I responded to that in my living room with my brand new Nintendo and all of my neighbors? Oh, yell it out. What do you got? Yes, with a very generous heart. I said, you guys can all watch me play Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. That's all there was. Occasionally, I allowed someone else to play for a few minutes, but I was still in control. That's my controller. You're going to give that back to me. So immediately, not only did we have this great party, but we almost immediately started fighting. Fighting over this amazing gift. I've been given this incredible gift. It was like a whole new world we could enter into. Mario jumping on the turtles, all that kind of stuff. And we were fighting over it. And within a couple of days, that stream of kids that was coming to my house to play with the Nintendo had stopped, and it was just me, by myself, playing Nintendo as much as I possibly could. Parents didn't know to put restrictions on kids back then, and eating chips the entire time. It's a very bad idea, very bad. Put restrictions on this. Put restrictions on this. So that's a little bit like, we're going to be talking about finance today. What happened with my Nintendo is a little bit like what happens with money. We're going to use this as an analogy a number of times this morning. God has given us amazing gifts in the world. He's given us a world to live in. He's given us everything that we have, and we immediately go and start fighting over it, trying to control it. There's a number of other analogies we can draw here. And we'll get to those as we go through the message today. We're finishing up a series of messages that has been called Wisdom for Living. We've been looking at the book of Proverbs in particular and other sections of the Bible and taking different categories of life. You can see what all of those were in your bulletin. They're right on the front. Things like anger and diligence and parenting, different categories of life, and saying, what is the wisdom that the Bible can teach us in this area? We said at the beginning that following God's way, so God created the universe. He's the one who made it. And so if we follow the ways that He arranged things, our life won't go perfect, but it'll be like going with the flow of the universe. It will be like going downstream rather than trying to paddle upstream if we're going the opposite way from the way that God made things. So today we'll take a look at finance, money. And we're going to start that off by looking at what is the context here? What is the major context of money? How does the Bible view money? Then we'll look at some practical realities, 3 different practical pieces of advice that the Bible gives us about money. How can we use it well? How can we make sure it doesn't destroy us or lead us the wrong way? All right, so let's jump into our first Bible verses here. And here we're going to be answering the question, and hopefully the answer should be obvious to most of you. We're going to be answering the question, Whose money is it, anyways? Whose money is it? The Bible verses this week are not going to be up on the screen. So you've got them in your notes, in your bulletin, if you're here. If you're here physically in the building. If you're watching online, then you don't have that in your hand. You're going to have to look it up in a real Bible or on your phone. That's going to be a challenge for you today. So we're going to look at Psalm 24. And we're going to see what is the context here. How is the Bible viewing money, and whose money is it anyway? If you don't want, you can also just listen to the words here. It's on the back of the notes in your bulletin. You can also just listen to it as I read it out. The earth is the Lord's. So the Lord is the way the Bible refers to God. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. The world and all who live in it. Well, some might say that's not fair. Why is it his? Why would the earth belong to God and all people who live in it belong to God? Well, he founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters. So it's his because he made it. Because he made it. Let me read the rest of the first half of this psalm for you. Who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? The one who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not trust in an idol or swear by a false god. They will receive blessing from the Lord and vindication from God their Savior. Such is the generation of those who seek him, who seek your face, God of Jacob. So let's think for a minute about what this psalm is telling us. It's telling us something very simple, and that is this, that the earth, the world, all human beings, they belong to God because he made everything. So this includes our money, which in our society represents all the things that we have. You can get just about any material, physical thing by using money. And so the money represents our power to use and to trade the things that have been given to us. So all of these things, the perspective of the Bible is that these things belong to God. And that's a very different perspective than if I think primarily they belong to me. Now, the things that I have, the money that I have, I will often say, it is mine. But if we want to follow the way that God is outlining in the Bible, we have to hold that not tightly, but very loosely. When I say it is mine, what I really mean is this has been entrusted to me by God to use for good purposes. It's something that he made, that he created this world, all the resources that are in it, and he has allowed me in my life to decide how some of those are going to be used. And that perspective changes everything about how we're going to use money. And it will enable us to use it in a way that won't destroy us and the people around us, but it will help us. Think back to the remote control, okay? My thought when I got that Nintendo was not that this was a gift given to me by my parents to be shared with others and bless people. My thought was that this is mine. It is something that primarily I should use for my own benefit. And with that thought, I immediately destroyed all the relationships around me and isolated myself. And my parents, who had given me this gift, what were they probably thinking as they watched that? They were probably thinking a lot of things, like, should I take back that Nintendo from this kid who is just playing it all the time and isolating himself? They were thinking, I wish that he would use it, he would share it the right way, so that that Nintendo that he's been given wouldn't hurt him in his life, but it would actually help him. He could use that Nintendo in a way that would help him make friends with the other people in the neighborhood, which I had struggled to do for a long time, instead of using it in a way that is destroying those friendships. And it all begins with how I'm viewing it. Am I viewing it as mine, or am I thinking of it as a gift that my parents have given me? If I think of my money and my resources as a gift that my Father in heaven has given to me, that God has given to me, then I will use it in ways that will help me and other people in my life, not in ways that will harm me. You can think back on this same point. We can think back to Genesis chapter 2. I'm not going to read this, but just point it out. I'll say the story again. In Genesis chapter 2, God plants this beautiful garden. He's created the world. He's created the heavens, the outer space. He's created the sun and the moon. He's made the seas and the land. He's made plants come up. He's made animals on the earth. He's made human beings in his image. And as if that weren't enough, he makes a place for us. This garden that was called Eden. And he planted this garden so that it would grow fruit trees, the things that we needed to live and thrive. And then he gave Adam work to do in that garden, right? He gave Adam the work of tending the garden, taking care of it, taking care of the animals. And then he put Eve into the garden so that Eve was there to complete Adam. Without both of them together, they could never accomplish the mission that they were really on. So God had given all these amazing gifts to Adam and Eve. He'd given them these gifts, and he'd given them their work. And so this is where we can start to see even our work is a gift from God. Do you see it? We see in Genesis chapter 2, the work that the human beings are given to do is actually, the foundation for it is established by God. Without him creating the world and planting this garden and showing them how to do the work and giving them the right people that they needed to help, they could never have done the work that they needed to do. And yet in our world, many of us are tempted to think, I worked for it, therefore I have a right to it. I have a right to the exclusive use of it because I worked for it. It is mine. And yet, could you even do your job if you hadn't simply been born into a world where your job was possible? I'm speaking to those of us here who are working, who are adults. Could you even do your job and earn the money that you have? Would your money be worth anything if you hadn't simply been born into a world that was already established long before you were ever thought of by anyone but God? So even your work is nothing but what we would call grace, a free gift from God. The ability that you have to go and do something and then get a good return for it. This is a gift from God. There's a song that actually my mom tipped me off to. It's not a Christian song, but the theme of the song is just what a miracle it is that the world exists at all. And the main line of that song, which is the first note in your notes, you can fill in the blank if you want to follow along here. The main line in the song is this: the true miracle is that anything exists at all. The true miracle is that anything exists at all. If I view the world from that perspective, when I wake up in the morning, it is amazing that I'm even breathing. It is a miracle that I have a body that can do things. It is astonishing that there's food to eat and houses to live in and work to go and do. If I approach the world with that perspective in mind, I will use my money in a very different way. And this is the foundation on which all biblical wisdom, all the wisdom of the Bible about money is based. The world is a gift from God. Your life is a gift from God. Your money is a gift from God. So let's start talking about then what some of the places that the Bible gives us wisdom about how to use our money. The first one is around debt and saving. This is where the Bible starts to get very practical. Much of the wisdom that's given in the book of Proverbs, which we've been reading throughout the summer, much of the wisdom there about money is about debt and savings. Now, I want to say a couple of things before I even get into this. The point that you can write down in your notes, this is point number 2, is this: debt is not a sin, it is a trap. Debt is not a sin, it is a trap. Now, the world was very different in the time that the book of Proverbs was written. And so most of what's in the book of Proverbs is just completely against debt in every way. In fact, in the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible, the teaching for the people of Israel was do not loan money at interest under any circumstances. Because in their economic system, it really always was a way to exploit other people. Now, in the New Testament, things changed, and our economic system today, without going into some big financial lecture, is very, very different than it was then. And so it's not the case that debt today is always a way to exploit other people, but it is often a way that people are exploited and kept in bondage. Sometimes it's a way that people are released to do things they never could have done otherwise. So as when you go into debt to buy a house, how many here could have purchased a house, if you have purchased a house, if there was no ability to take a loan or go into debt? Yeah, that's what I thought. Many of us here can't purchase a house even with the ability to go into debt in this market. But much of what we're going to be reading here in Proverbs is going to be very against debt, and that's because debt is a trap, especially what we would call today unsecured debt. All right, so let's read here. This is in Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 7. Again, this is on the back of your notes if you want to read it. And it's just one line, and here's how it goes. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Have you ever felt, many of you have felt this, when you've been in debt, especially debt that you didn't have, a house that had value, that was covering or worth more than that debt. If you've just simply been in debt, credit card debt, student loan debt, just running up a line of credit at the bank, you know what that feels like. It feels oppressive. It feels dark. It has felt for me often like waking up in the middle of the night worried. When I was in college and university, I took on a lot of debt because everyone around me said, that's a really good idea. Do it. Take on a lot of debt, and here you can have more and more. I was 18, 19, 20. Sure, I'll sign the paper. That's way down the road when I'm going to have to pay that back. So I took on debt not only to cover my tuition, but I also took on debt just to live, to pay my rent, to buy things that I decided in my head that I needed. And that debt racked up to a huge amount by the time I graduated. I am very thankful for the degree that I was able to get, but I am not thankful for the more than 10 years that it took me to pay off those loans. More than 10 years of hard work, of not being able to make certain decisions. There are things that I would have gone and done in life, but I couldn't, because I had to stay in a position where I could pay off that debt. That's how the borrower is slave to the lender, even in today's society, where we don't have slavery in any in any way, the way that they used to. So what should I do with debt? I should be very careful with it. We can't get into all the details of how you should deal with debt just in one sermon, one message, but if you want to know more, at some point during this year, probably in the winter, we will run another finance course. We'll go into all the details of how you can get out of debt by following the principles that are in the Bible. But I want to read for you Proverbs chapter 6, verses 1 to 5, because this is an amazing passage that is about what you should do if you find yourself in a situation where you have huge unsecured debt. Here's what you should do. Now, I won't read the first couple of verses because it talks about, in this case, it's actually an issue of co-signing on a loan that Proverbs is talking about. If you've put up security for someone you don't know or even for a friend or neighbor. But here's what it says, starting at verse 4. Here's what you should do. If you're in a bunch of debt, bunch of debt that you don't know how you're going to get out of. It's unsecured. Do this, my son. Proverbs always talks to you like you're a child. Do this, my son, to free yourself, since you have fallen into your neighbor's hands, into the hands of the one who's loaned you the money. Go to the point of exhaustion and give your neighbor no rest. Allow no sleep to your eyes, no slumber to your eyelids. Free yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, and like a bird from the snare of the fowler. Do everything in your power. Whip up all your best energy and work as hard as you can to escape that debt so that you can be free. Recognize that you have been caught in a trap if you are in unsecured debt, and free yourself from it as fast as you can. That's what Proverbs is saying right here. In our finance course, we use material from Dave Ramsey. Nod your head if you've gone through that material, or maybe you've seen some of his stuff before. He is a hilarious speaker. And so what he says here in this part, imagine a gazelle, right? So a gazelle is in Africa, and they're really, really fast. And what's the main predator that chases and tries to hunt a gazelle? What is it? Shout it out. A cheetah. A cheetah is the main predator that goes after the gazelles. And so what do the gazelles do? They're always on the lookout. And when they see a cheetah, do they just sit there and go, oh, there's a cheetah over there. Well, we better move away. No. Dave Ramsey yells really loud at this point. They go, cheetah! And they all pop up all at once, and then they bolt as fast as they can possibly go, because they know that they're about to be caught. And Proverbs is giving us wisdom here about what to do in unsecured debt. We should whip up that kind of attitude to free ourselves from it, because it's a trap. So there's the first point on debt, how we should escape from it. Right after that section in Proverbs chapter 6, we have some information on saving as well. Saving is very wise, and the Bible talks about this a number of places. Let me read this next section right after that verse about freeing yourself. It says this: go to the ant, you sluggard. What's a sluggard? That's a lazy person. Isn't that a great descriptive word for a lazy person? You sluggard. Consider its ways, the ant's ways, not the sluggard, and be wise. The ant has no commander, no overseer, no ruler. Yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from sleep? Have you ever been the sluggard rolling around in your bed, not ready to get out? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief, and scarcity like an armed man. Look at the images here. Poverty is waiting, just waiting for you to let your guard down and ready to steal from you like a thief. Scarcity, not having what you need, is ready to take you out like a robber who's lying in wait and ready to attack you. You've got to be consistent. This doesn't mean that you never rest or never go on vacation. Don't take it too far. The Bible has a lot to say about rest as well. But we should be saving. We should be working diligently. This is something that the Bible holds up as extremely important. All right, so there's our thoughts, some Bible thoughts on debt and saving. Now let's move a little further. And we're going to talk about the danger of wealth. So if you follow the instructions in Proverbs, you will eventually have wealth. Most of us here already have great wealth compared to many, many people in the world, and almost everyone in the history of the world. All of us have great wealth. And if we follow these instructions in Proverbs to make sure that we don't go into debt unless there's a good reason, actually a good reason, a reason that will help us, and we make sure that we're saving and working hard, that's part of who we are because everything has been given to us and God is in control, we're going to honor that. If we follow that, eventually we will have more and more money. And a big part of what the Bible teaches about money is that once you have a significant amount of it, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. This is something that Jesus taught on very regularly. In fact, there is no one who gives more teaching about this in the whole Bible than Jesus himself. So, your point here to fill in your notes is this. It's not wrong to have wealth. It's really not. A good section of the Bible is teaching us how to get to the place where we have wealth. But it is dangerous. It's not wrong to have wealth, but it is dangerous. Let's read a little bit more from Proverbs here. And we'll go to Proverbs 23. And this one is not on your notes. Proverbs 23, verses 4 to 5. Let me just pull it up here. Here we're seeing Proverbs talking about the danger of wealth. And this is a theme that Jesus is going to pick up on in the New Testament as well. Proverbs 23, verses 4 and 5. Do not wear yourself out to get rich. So we've heard this teaching already about how we need to make sure we're not in debt, we need to be wise, and we need to be working diligently so that poverty doesn't overcome us, and we need to be saving, storing up so that we have something to use when trouble comes. But now we hear this: do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust in your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they're gone. For they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. They will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. Proverbs 11 and verse 28 says, if you trust in your money, you will go down. If you trust in your money, it will cause you to fall. Before we go into the teachings of Jesus on this, I want to draw the analogy again between money and the video games. How does it feel when you get into that mode? Who in the room has, I know not everyone in the room has experienced this, but many of you have, and I'm going to see if you're willing to admit it today. Have you ever had a phase in your life when you felt sucked in and addicted to a video game? Yeah, I know there's more of you. About half the room raised their hands. You guys watching online, hopefully you raised your hand at home. Most of us have experienced this. It does depend on your generation, and to a little bit it depends, to some degree it depends on your gender. More men are sucked into this than women, although women are sucked into it as well. When you feel that, here's what it feels like to be sucked into a video game. First you start playing, you think, oh, this is a nice little game, I like it. Oh yeah, I'm putting the blocks together, or I'm conquering the world, I'm killing the bad guys. This is nice. And then you think, no, this is really nice. I want to play this more. And then you start to feel like, actually, this is important. I mean, you might not think that in your mind, but you feel like it's important. I need to get to the next level. And when you stop playing the game, even to eat for a little while, you're thinking about, what's that next level going to be like? This is what happens. What's that next level going to be like? What am I going to gain when I get to that level? You see, a whole world, especially in certain kinds of video games, a whole world is constructed. A world where you have challenges that you have to overcome, and you get rewards when you succeed, and you are penalized when you fail, and your whole mind, even your spirit, I think, sometimes gets sucked into that world. And it gets to the point, one of my sons right now is addicted to Fortnite. It's the youngest one who's not in here. And he literally, I went to wake him up the other day, and this is what he said to me. He's sound asleep. I said, Nathan, wake up. And he said, Dad, stop it, you're interrupting my dream. It's about Fortnite. He hadn't even opened his eyes yet. And so it feels like it's very important, like there's nothing more important than this thing. That's the feeling. You might not think that, but that's the feeling. You're sucked into it. You almost can't stop yourself without huge self-control from going and playing more and more. It's taking over your life. You're forgetting about the real world that's out there. And then what happens? What happens a year later? Or even a week later, if your parents cut you off from that video game, or if you simply decide to stop cold turkey, what does it seem like, that video game world, what does it seem like once you have some distance from it? Once you've moved away from it for even just a few days or a month, and that addiction loses its grip on you, it feels like that was the stupidest waste of time I have ever engaged in my life. Why was I wasting my life in that thing, which is just, it's not even real. It's gone now. It sprouted wings and flew away. It wasn't the real world. Listen, money is just like that. Now, there are some differences. You need some money in your life to live and to provide and help other people. You don't need video games. You really don't, front row. But it's just the same. The day will come when some of us are caught up in working hard to gain more money. Even we don't feel like we love money, but we feel like it's necessary. I have to be spending my time and energy. To some degree you do. But if we'd allowed ourselves to become addicted, and that's the thing we're thinking about all the time, trying to gain more. We're only focused on retirement, only focused on getting the house, only focused on working more and what do I have in my bank account. It's got that feel to it that the video game addiction has. The day will come when the whole world will see that is past. The day will come beyond this life when all the money and all the things and the house and the retirement that you worked hard for will have no more meaning than Super Mario Brothers level 3. It will have no more meaning than that. It will be gone and passed away, and what will really matter is, did you make friends while you were playing the video game? Did you use it well? Did you pay attention to the one who gave you the gift, or did you just pay attention to the gift that was given? Let me highlight a few places from Jesus where he talks about this. I won't read this one, but the parable of the sower is the best place. We're going to be moving into a series of messages starting next week with our kickoff called Sudden Life, where we're looking through the book of Mark. The book of Mark is a story of Jesus and his work while he was on earth. And in that book, in chapter 4, you find him giving a teaching that's very famous called the parable of the sower. He talks about what makes a successful life and what can prevent you from living a successful life following God. One of the main things, one of the 3 things that he lists that can prevent you from living a successful life is the deceitfulness of wealth and the desires for other things. That is, desires for other things besides God and his mission and the life and calling that he's given you. The desire for other things. The desire for the new thing from IKEA. The desire for my next new guitar. The desire for nicer clothes. The desire for security, a better house. None of those things are bad in themselves. But if the desire grips us, it will prevent us from achieving the mission, the purpose of our lives. This is what Jesus teaches in that section in Mark 4. We'll actually go through it in a few weeks. It will prevent us from achieving the very thing that we were created to do if we allow it to grip us like that. And so, even though wealth is not a bad thing, it is a good thing. It is dangerous. In another section in Mark chapter 10, Jesus says he watches a rich young man. We'll talk about this a few weeks after that as well, during this next series. He watches a rich young man walk away from the calling that God has placed on his life because he can't give up his money. And right after he watches this, Jesus says how hard it is for a rich person. He doesn't just mean someone who has wealth, but someone who is gripped by it, to enter the kingdom of God, to enter the life that is really life. He says it's easier, do you know this verse? It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. His disciples are shocked. They know that it's good to be rich, right? They probably all want to be rich. They don't have very much money. They left their jobs to follow Jesus, so they probably are looking at the rich people thinking, those guys are in a great position. And they say, well, if that's the case, then who can ever be saved? Who can ever live life with God? And Jesus says, well, with God, all things are possible. And then he gives this teaching. I'm going to read it for you. And this is Jesus' vision. This is going to move into our last point, which will be about giving. The real advice of Scripture on how to avoid the danger of money. Jesus says, no one who has left home, who has left their home, or their brothers or sisters, or their mother or their father, or their children or their fields, for me and the gospel, will fail to receive 100 times as much in this present age. Homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, and fields, along with persecutions. Yeah, that's in there too. And in the age to come, they will receive eternal life. But, Jesus says, listen carefully, many who are first here will be last there, and the last first. Jesus here is painting a vision for us of a different kind of life. We'll come back to it in just a minute. Here's my last illustration for you, example. St. Francis of Assisi. Anybody ever heard of him? He was born a little while ago. 1182 is when he was born. That's 800 years before my wife was born. Okay, and several of you in this room probably. About 800 years before some of us were born. And he had lived this life of wealth growing up. And he felt God calling him in particular. He didn't think everyone was called to this, but he felt God calling him in particular to live a life where he had nothing. Nothing but the one set of clothing on his back, not a home, not food. He would simply go around and pray and ask people to give him stuff to eat so that he could survive. And when he felt that calling on his life, he did it. He started off by taking a whole bunch of his dad's money and giving it away to poor people. His dad really didn't like that. His dad actually sued him and took him to court. But as he did it, his whole town thought he was insane. They threw stuff at him. They made fun of him. And the more that they mocked him and persecuted him, the more full of joy he seemed. He would wander through the woods praising God. He seemed like a crazy person at first, and in some ways maybe he was a little bit crazy, but he wasn't mentally ill. He was full of joy and freedom because he had done what God had called him to do, and he was free from the money that he had grown up with. In fact, it inspired people so much. There's this scene in his life where another man in the town, who was one of the wealthiest men in town, an older man, is watching Francis's life and goes, for everything I have, I don't have what he has. We heard earlier that the more you have to take care of. This older man named Bernard of Quintaville, he was looking at Francis's life and said, he has nothing and he's free and full of joy. I have more than anyone in this town and I am burdened and depressed. And so he went to Francis and he said, show me how. And there's this moment where Francis says, I'll show you how. Give me your keys. And they go to his house and they literally give everything that he owns, because there's no banks then. Everything that he owns is at his home, locked away. And they give away everything that he has. And people, you can imagine what happens in the town. Imagine if Pastor Philip just started giving away money at his front door. He's got a lot of money to give, I know. So he's just giving away. Like, you come to my front door, here's $1,000. What would happen? I mean, people would flood there, right? People would be trampling each other like Black Friday to get to your front door. And this is what's happening with Francis and Bernard. And Bernard's given away everything he has like Francis, and all of a sudden he feels totally free and full of joy. and they walk away together, and it starts this movement that actually changes the course of history. Now, don't hear me saying that I think all of you need to give away every penny that you have. If God tells you to do that, you should do it. But for most of us, that's not the calling on our lives. But the point that I want to vividly get across with that illustration is this. The Bible teaches that giving, this is the last point for your notes this morning. The Bible teaches that giving is the pathway to freedom and joy. Giving is the pathway to freedom and joy. So the Bible's taught me here that everything I have comes from God. Okay, so I should use it for good purposes. I should think about the one who's given it to me, not just try and grab it all for myself. Good, that's good. Then what's some advice on how to deal with money? Well, I need to avoid debt unless there's a really good reason to go into debt. I need to avoid it because it's like a trap, and then I need to start saving. Well, what's going to happen then is that I actually have some money. Well, now I'm in danger. Because I'm in danger, Jesus says, of being trapped by that money and only thinking about that gripping my life and it eventually destroying my life. What is the solution? Give. Give freely with a heart full of thanksgiving. Jesus says again in Luke chapter 16, verse 9, Jesus says that you should use worldly wealth to make friends. And then you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. That part that we read from Mark where he said, if you give away your home and your field, and you give up all of these natural relationships, that's not exactly on the issue of money, but it's connected. If you give up all of this stuff, you will receive it back 100 times in this present age, and in the age to come, eternal life. What is Jesus saying here? He's painting a picture. What we do, we save, we work hard, we save all our money, and then we give it away as God leads us. We use some of it to provide for our needs and to provide for those around us, but much of it we give away to help others, to build relationships with other people, to bless people in the world as God leads us. Well, how do I know that I'll be secure if I do that? It's actually an act of faith. Jesus isn't telling everyone to do this. He's telling people who have given their lives to him to do it. He's telling people who have given their lives to him, that if they are willing to give away much of what they have, that he will take care of them. He will bring them into a new kind of family. They'll receive things that they never expected as they give away money and other resources and time, give up some of the time, maybe even with their natural family, so they can go spend time with other people who need help. He's going to be there for them, and they're going to receive back different kinds of homes. How many of us here, as we've entered into life with God's church, have received homes? I have. Many of you have, some of you in this room have allowed me to live in your home for a period of time. Most of you in this room have had me in your home. I have received homes as I've given up for the gospel, for God's sake, what he's called me to do, given up actually the opportunity to purchase a home, maybe living in the place where I grew up. I have received other homes within the family of God. I've received other fields, other resources. He's describing here a different way of life. A way of life where we freely give. The Bible teaches that we should start. A good way to start, a rule of thumb, is with 10% giving to the church. But really giving everything that we have, holding it all with open hands and saying to God, show me what you want me to do with all of these things that you've given to me. We'll wrap up with this quote from John Wesley, which is a fantastic quote. He says this about money: give all your money to God. Now, he doesn't mean that you give it all to the poor and have nothing for yourself, but he means what I just talked about, that you're going to hold everything you have before God with an open hand, saying, you show me what to do with it. You have no pretense for laying up treasure on earth. Pastor Philip talked about that earlier. While you gain all you can, so work hard, be diligent, don't go into debt, save all you can, give all you can. That is all that you have. This is the biblical vision for how we should use our money, and it's the path to true freedom. Let's pray.